This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
In case you missed what happened, basically the Ross pedals situation was that Josh Scott kind of was super transparent, he's bringing out a transparent drive sooner, about the costs involved with building the Ross pedal, because he was basically blowing them out for $79. He said they cost $76 to build, and I kind of took some of the numbers from that video and kind of made some, now I know, faulty assumptions about what it might actually cost to build a pedal in America in 2024. And I was asking the question, which was, I worded it poorly, admittedly, are pedal companies ripping us off essentially as customers? Because when it comes to our DAW, we paid like $169 for that sort of thing. The pedals are costing JHS $76 to make. Why is the markup hitting us as it is? And then I kind of went down the rabbit hole, was like, well, let's open up the only JHS pedal I had, which is the JHS Crimson. As someone with no manufacturing pedal building background, it just seemed to me like it was expensive, you know, so I kind of felt like $76 to build something like that, because it's a similar price. I felt like it seemed high. I now know why. So in this video, I kind of wanted to apologize to Josh for, you know, faulty assumptions, and I wasn't intending to spread misinformation or whatever. It's just, you know, as a consumer and someone buying this stuff, interesting, and I think it's really great that we now got that information out there about, you know, kind of what these margins are. So if you've ever wondered how much it costs to build like a JHS Crimson, you know, how much dealers are paying for these sorts of pedals, you know, what is the profit on those sorts of things, I think it's a great response that Josh has actually put that information out there into the world, because hitherto we've not known this stuff, right? And that is why there's been speculation, because, you know, any normal consumer like me who doesn't necessarily work in manufacturing or doesn't understand, you know, doesn't have any real grasp of like the cost involved in making this sort of stuff, is naturally, I think, going to assume that maybe there's quite a lot of profit being made on these things. I don't know, that was me, that's on me, and that was definitely how I was operating with those assumptions. So I think going forward, thanks to Josh's video, I have like a new set of assumptions with which to work. I'm going to assume that quite a lot of folks out there that are watching videos on YouTube about guitar pedals didn't know any of this stuff either, and so I think that's kind of the whole point, really, that for 15 years apparently pedal companies have been kind of frustrated that there is this perception that they're way overcharging for stuff or making a huge amount of profit. It takes a knobhead like me asking, are they ripping us off? And now, because of Josh graciously sort of responding to that and taking it in, hopefully, the spirit that I was asking it, which was more or less kind of like, well, why does it cost this much to build this sort of stuff? Like questions that, you know, you don't necessarily have to answer, but I think it just makes us, people making decisions about whether to buy or not buy pedals, better to be informed than not in some cases, I think. Because now when I look at a JHS Crimson or whatever, I can kind of look and see, well, the dealer is paying like between $95 to $125 for that. You know, Josh has spent about $60 actually making the thing. There's not like a huge margin there necessarily, is kind of what I've learned. I guess actually as well, I kind of wanted to ask the question, like, how do we talk about cost of this stuff? Are you able to ascertain whether a pedal is even expensive or not relative to what it is without having an intimate knowledge of the business? Do we know how much it costs to build a pedal in Japan, for example, or whatever? So is it possible to even have a discussion about price without coming across like an arsehole, is my real question. Some of this stuff seems expensive to me, like £400 for a reverb pedal seems expensive, £700 for a reverb pedal seems really expensive, but is that just what it costs? Do we just have to kind of get used to that idea that gear costs are going to keep going up? Our perception of gear is probably going to stay roughly the same about what it was like when we were 20, 22, something like that maybe, or, you know, when we first got into, you know, this idea of boutique gear. I watched Josh's video last night, and I thought it was really, really interesting stuff. And the headline for me is, of course, the guy, JHS, knows more about building pedals and what it costs to build a pedal than a knobhead in his bedroom. And that's a revelation, obviously. But I think the point really is that the people that actually know this stuff are the people building the pedals, and without this kind of knowledge, I guess we would be speculating. Myself, cynically, I'd assumed that once you start to scale things up in the pedal building world, that costs kind of come down. I kind of like wanted to go through some of the things that I've definitely been wrong about with this stuff, and now I have a better idea of what it costs to build a pedal in the USA, I think. So first of all, there's a couple of points that I just wanted to make clear, that I wasn't suggesting that JHS should be selling his pedals at cost, which I think was one of the things that he kind of took from the start of the video, but I think by the end of the video it kind of got more where I was coming from. I wasn't saying it was a good thing that he was selling the Ross pedals for $79. Yeah, so that's kind of point one. And two, there was like a point where I said about if you sold 8,000 pedals for the price that they were, it'd be like a 1.5 million income type situation. Now, I wasn't assuming that that was all going to be profit either. We didn't know, or I didn't know, and I don't know if any of you guys knew, like what the split was between dealer and JHS, but it was more like the Ross operation, if you sold 8,000 units as a whole, would be sort of 1.5 million in that sort of range for 8,000 pedals. Income would be split between JHS, and some would be split between the dealers. Okay, now there's much more info that we know, so I'll just share some of the things that I've learned from this video. I think it's an incredible video that he's made in terms of helping people like me understand, you know, what these things are about. So the JHS Crimson. So I kind of took this thing apart in a video, and why? Because I was just literally interested. It wasn't like intended to be like a gotcha or anything like that. And I think, I don't know if you guys could relate to this, but my assumption really was that it's like a pretty big company making this stuff. I think it's 40 people, Josh said at the time that I made the video. The thing that I said was 35. So the things that you get in the box here, like all of these have a cost, but I think he said in the video that the JHS Crimson, which was what I was unboxing, had like a bill of materials of about $40. The labour cost involved was something like $20. So about $60 to make this pedal, which is, I have to say, more than I had expected. He gave, like, you know, a load of insight to loads of this stuff. So obviously the boxes themselves have a cost and all of that. JHS Gravity Pick, that's probably not nothing. JHS little badge. 2 PCBs, I think he said that 2.6 million, something like that, is the spend on PCBs in 2023. So what I was thinking, and I guess what I was wrongly saying really, was what I meant was cheap relative to, you know, hand soldering a PCB. Of course, there's loads of other costs involved. I think JHS has these built in 3, from what I can gather, PCB manufacturing places around the USA. But yes, those are a significant expense, and I think make up about half of the cost, because he said that the enclosure is $8 and that sticker part on the front is $8. So about $16 for the actual enclosure. I'm going to guess, I don't know, because it didn't give the information like the knobs and stuff. I'm going to guess those are relatively cheap compared to the other parts of the pedal. So what would we say, like half of the cost is the enclosure, half of the cost is the 2 PCBs, maybe? I don't know. Does that seem safe at this point to then kind of make that as an assumption? So that's really interesting to me. And then the labor cost with this line, about $20. So that's really interesting to me. Then what is also crucially interesting to me is that, and this is sort of a little bit of generalization from the Ross pedal stuff as well, which was basically what all of this was about, is kind of just like asking, well, how does this stuff work? Depending on the dealer, these are being sold to the dealer for between $95 and $125 from what he said, which could mean, you know, as little as like $30 profit per unit for JHS. Now I think there's a load of costs that they don't account for in, so he's talked about like overheads and some elements of that. So I think in terms of how he's accounting, because he attributed a bunch of other stuff to like cost of business and cost of doing business. There is a name for all of this sort of stuff, but it's not activity based accounting, so that all of the costs go into the pedal. Do you know what I mean? So like there's a bunch of overheads. The main takeaway for me is, and I did know that they were made in the USA, but basically all of these bits, the scale is not necessarily quite there that you can get them as cheap as I would have assumed that you could. So that's now we know. I'm selling a course on pedal assembly, by the way. So anyway, next thing that was interesting to me, there's loads of stuff. I've got a whole page of stuff that I thought was interesting, but you should maybe go watch that video because it's really interesting. So he'd kind of assumed that when I was saying like 1.5 million was like the sort of headline amount of income that could possibly be generated from the Ross thing, which I said in the video was like a flop, which I don't think went down super well, but I meant as in terms of it didn't perform as they had expected, and I thought that was kind of the whole point of the Ross video in the first place. Yeah, he said that like actually if it had all gone to plan, it would have been like $760,000 would have been what JHS would have like taken in income from that, not profit but income, and then obviously you take off all the expenses from that. Yeah, this was one really interesting point. About 19 minutes into the video, he's held the price of the Morning Glory at $199 for 15 years, but every single part has increased, but he's not even adjusted the price for inflation. Now, most of you folks who've seen that video and seen this video wouldn't have known that I think like 2-3 weeks ago I talked about the Strymon Big Sky MX and about how that basically was pretty much the same price as the Big Sky when it came out, but adjusted for inflation. So this is not something that I'm not seeing or not totally aware of. Like, it's a thing that I've been kind of saying, like, at some point do our expectations as guitarists need to change about how much this gear should cost. Like, I'm still thinking of like 200, 250, 300 pounds is quite expensive for a pedal, whereas we look at the numbers, potentially depending on where they're built and all that sort of stuff, they're actually maybe not as expensive as the perception is in our head. Like, these things are more expensive to build than we think. So yeah, 1948, he said, every year I pay more for every part that's in every pedal. And I think 2023, he said basically the entire cost of parts for pedals that year spend was $5 million. So that's kind of given some idea of like the scale. I think there was plenty of misunderstanding on my part and lack of knowledge in this area. As I said in the video, I'm definitely not an expert in any of this stuff. Obviously, you know that. I just think it's really interesting now to sort of look at these things with some knowledge, you know, knowing now that these things cost roughly what they do. Like, would you have expected that enclosure to be $8, this part on top to be another $8, so that's $16, $20 for the PCBs, and then all your knobs and bits and pieces like that. I didn't expect it to be that high in terms of cost for the actual materials. Interestingly then, to see that they're able to, because this will still have two PCBs, right? The JHS 3 series. The enclosure, I think, is where they're saving more money on the 3 series, right? This could be totally wrong as well, but in terms of pedals, quite a lot of what the cost is in terms of just making it look different, differentiating the look. Be interested to hear more and learn more about like what the margins are across this sort of pedal versus this sort of pedal. And does that change? Because as I said yesterday, because this arrived in the post yesterday, I was at a gig on Friday night when I started getting emails like, or messages like, you've seen this. But so that's a $99 pedal, which I'd ordered already because I was kind of like just interested to see the difference. But yeah, so that's $99 built in the USA. I do think that's actually quite a good deal. And whether they make any profit on those or not, I'm not entirely sure. Presume some, but presumably less than on something like the Crimson. Anyway, so that's a lot of stuff that I've learned from that video. And again, apologies for coming across like a total fool, but that's obviously I don't work in the pedal industry and never have, or manufacturing. I've worked in a supermarket, I've worked in a hospital, I've done some other bits and pieces like that, but you know, I don't know how much goes into this sort of stuff, so Now we have a bit more knowledge, and I think it's, you know, sort of like 15 years apparently of frustration where, you know, people have this idea about what it might cost to build these pedals. In 2023, I think that's what it's costing, 2024. So it's kind of just, you know, interesting to get some of those misconceptions cleared up. So cheers for making the video, Josh, and apologies to all your commenters. Now I know. So, well, I know a bit. Sorry for breaking your pedal. Obviously, I don't know how to disassemble a pedal, so I do apologise for that. Cheers for stopping by.